Hello, Stranger Things. We all know it, we all love it. It's a show that's released on Netflix. The Duffer Brothers came up with it. So Stranger Things is set to have 5 seasons. At the time I'm recording this video, the 5th season has not been released yet. This video essay is going to mostly focus on Stranger Things 4 because this video is all about Eddie Munson, and he was only involved in Stranger Things Season 4. Stranger Things also has a thing they do where they give certain characters books that go along with their storylines. Now, these books are not necessarily 100% canon to the Duffer Brothers version of the characters, but when analyzing characters, it really gives us a deep dive into what we know about them, because through the show you only get to know so much. The character we're going to be discussing today, as I said earlier, is Eddie Munson. He does have a prequel book. It's called Flight of Icarus. It was released in 2023. So we're going to go over Flight of Icarus, and then we're going to go over Season 4, everything Eddie in Season 4 of Stranger Things. If you've never heard of Eddie Munson, here are some things that you might recognize him from. He was a very popular character in 2022 when Stranger Things came out, way more popular than the Duffer Brothers or anyone on Stranger Things ever could have thought he would be. A lot of people connected with him in a really deep way. Some things you might know him from are the Chrissy Wake Up song. Chrissy, wake up! Another thing he's really infamous for, unfortunately, is his little devil horn scene. A lot of people say it's cringy. I would argue that it's not cringy, it's perfect to his character. So he does a little in the cafeteria. I'll insert a picture. So a lot of people don't like that scene. And then if you're on any social media platforms such as TikTok, you probably have also heard his name. Especially if you were online in 2022. There was a song that a fan released called Eddie's Song, and a lot of people have been pairing it with a clip from, I think, Comic Convention, so I'll insert that here. Eddie, baby, I just saw Steve. Yeah. A lot of people say that the fandom ruined him as a character, but I disagree. People were just passionate, and that's okay. Did it go a little far sometimes? Yeah, but so does everything in fandom. So the book Flight of Icarus happens in the same time that Season 2 is happening. So it is 1984. Eddie Munson is 18, freshly 18. He is a senior in high school. Let's get into some of the characters. So, of course, we have Eddie Munson. We have Al Munson, or Alan, which is his deadbeat father. He calls Eddie Jr. One thing that Eddie struggles with in this book is that everybody sees him as a copy of Al, and they expect him to be a screw-up like Al. Another character in this book is Wayne Munson. We see him more in Stranger Things Season 4. Unfortunately, they don't have a scene together in the show, but he does show up. Alright, for more context, Eddie started Hellfire Club in 9th grade. Some people in Hellfire Club are Jeff, Gareth, and Ronnie. Ronnie does not appear in the show, but he is Eddie's childhood best friend. He's in Hellfire and their band Corroded Coffin. And Ronnie plays the drums. Jeff and Gareth are also in Corroded Coffin, as well as Hellfire, as I said. So, from what we know from the book, Corroded Coffin plays at the Hideout. Every Tuesday is what Eddie says in the series. Eddie also works at the Hideout in the book. One night at the Hideout, he meets Paige Warner, who went to Hawkins High School and then moved to LA, and now she is a scout assistant for WR Records. She sees potential in Corroded Coffin and tells Eddie that after the show. The one thing, though, is that Corroded Coffin needs to record a demo to send to WR Records, and Eddie does not have the money to do that. While this is all happening, Al gets out of jail for a prior charge and tells Eddie that he owes a lot of money to some bad people. So he tells Eddie that he has a job that he needs his help with, and that job will pay them, and Eddie will get the money he needs to record that demo. We also see multiple times, but the first time that Eddie and the rest of Hellfire are bullied by Tommy Hagen and Jason Carver. These are two characters that are in the show as well. Another character in the show, Chrissy, she sticks up for Hellfire and Eddie, and then we get a cute little flashback scene between the two of them to a school talent show in 8th grade. Backstage, I think it's before they both perform. So basically what happens in this flashback is that Eddie is looking out the curtain for his dad, Al, and then Chrissy joins him and asks, "Hey, who are you looking for? Or what are you doing?" And Eddie's like, "I don't think my dad came." And then Chrissy's like, "Well, I wish my mom didn't come." And they bond a little bit. Eddie tries to go up to Chrissy after the show, but her mom drags her away. Into flashback. So Eddie is blamed for the fight between Hellfire and the jocks. And the principal, when he's being blamed, the principal asks Eddie why he doesn't just drop out. This is a major theme throughout the entire book. Principal is like, "Get out of here. Why are you still here?" basically. A little after this, Al reveals what the job he has lined up for him and Eddie is. They're basically going to steal a fraction of a drug supply. In total, it's going to get them $15,000. Al's going to take $10,000 of that, while Eddie gets the $5,000 he needs to record the demo with Corroded Coffin. Al introduces Eddie at this time to Reefer Rick. We know Reefer Rick from season 4. We'll get into him a little later, but this is when Eddie meets him. And to prepare for this heist, they go to Warzone, which is also mentioned in season 4, and Eddie goes back there in season 4. This is the first time Eddie goes, though. Now that Eddie knows he has the money, they go to record a demo. Before this, Eddie opens up to Paige about his mom, and reveals why he's into music. So let's transfer into talking about Eddie's mom a little bit. Eddie's mom's name is Elizabeth Franklin. She was a musician in Memphis, Tennessee when she met Al. They got married in March of 1966. She was a big fan of Chicago blues music, and she took all of her music with her when she moved to Hawkins. As she was raising him, she showed Eddie. Unfortunately, Elizabeth got sick and died when Eddie was only 6, leaving Al to take care of him. Al did teach Eddie how to play guitar, but it was his mom's love for music that made him want to play in the first place. Back to the recording session, everything is going horribly. They struggle for a while, and then Eddie talks to them, calms them down, and they get a perfect recording out. Back with the Al plot, Al and Eddie drive to Illinois to steal a tow truck for the heist. Eddie hotwires the tow truck with ease, and they are eventually caught by some mechanics. Al bolts, and Eddie ends up with a gun to his head. While Eddie has the gun to his head, Al does return in a truck and drives the truck into a mechanic. After the mechanic's down, Eddie gets up and gets in the truck with Al, and they leave back to Hawkins. Back at school, the jocks and Hellfire have another fight that leaves Gareth with a broken wrist. This idea of jocks being violent comes up again in season 4. After this fight, Eddie is blamed again by the principal, and he's chewed out. This is where the principal tries to blackmail Eddie and says, "Well, you need to stop Hellfire or else your friend Ronnie is going to lose their NYU scholarship." The principal also tells Eddie again that he should do everybody a favor and drop out. Eddie eventually agrees to drop out because he figures he's going to go to LA soon. Jumping forward a little bit, Paige meets with Eddie to tell him that her boss liked their demo and wants him to go to LA to audition for the label. In excitement, Eddie does kiss Paige until Paige interrupts and tells Eddie that the boss likes Eddie, but he doesn't like Corroded Coffin. At first, Eddie is completely against this. He stands up for his band, But Paige persists, and Eddie thinks of what everybody's saying, that everyone will be better without him and Hawkins, and he eventually agrees. Al finds out about this moving to LA and record label deal with Eddie the night before their heist, and he asks Eddie if he wants Al to move with him to LA to be like a real family. Eddie is very excited because his dad, who hasn't been in his life for a while, finally wants to be in his life, and he says yes. Moving on to the heist, Al and Eddie follow the supply truck to a gas station, and while the drivers are inside, they put water in the gas tank so that they have to call a tow truck. Using the stolen truck from Illinois, they tow the truck to a shop, and Al flushes the engine while Eddie steals the right amount of product. Everything works out without a hitch. They sell the product to Reefer Rick for the $15,000. That night, Paige invites Eddie to come and live with her in LA and meet her family for dinner before she goes back. Eddie agrees to meet for dinner, and he shows up with daffodils and chocolates for her mom. Everything goes great at dinner. They're laughing, they're making small talk, they're having fun. And then Paige's brother Mark shows up because he comes home from baseball practice. He mentions that some students are in satanic cults at Hawkins, meaning Hellfire. Her parents start to say that they dislike Hellfire and this whole satanic cult thing. At first, Paige tries to stick up for Hellfire, knowing that Eddie runs it, and then Eddie pretends not to know about Hellfire at all. The next day, Eddie goes to Wayne to thank him for everything he's done for him before he goes to LA. When Eddie gets home, the drivers of the supply truck are waiting for him. They're also referred to as thugs. And they reveal to Eddie that Al didn't actually need the money to pay off bad people because the people he stole from, Al was already working with. So Al stole from his partner because he didn't like the cut of the money he was given. So Al lied to him. Al shows up and Eddie yells at Al for lying to him his whole life. And then as payback, the thugs set their house on fire. Because of the fire, a officer shows up, Officer Moore, from Hawkins PD, and one thug shoots Officer Moore. Al steals Eddie's van keys from his pocket and leaves. He completely dips. Eddie, on the other hand, stays and puts pressure to Officer Moore's wounds to stop the bleeding. When more Hawkins PD show up, Eddie is arrested, and at the station, Chief Hopper, so the chief of police, Jim Hopper, he's a bigger character in the show. He tells him that he saved Moore's life and that if he didn't stay, Moore would have died. During this conversation, Hopper also tells Eddie to stay in town so it doesn't look like he's running away and so it doesn't look like he's guilty. Eddie uses his one phone call while he's locked up to call Paige and tell her that he's not going to LA because he has to stay in Hawkins. They fight and they have a sort of breakup. They weren't really dating, but things end between them. From LA, Paige bails Eddie out of jail, but refuses to pick up any of his calls. So that's a complete end to their little situation. After Paige bails Eddie out, Wayne takes Eddie in, and then Eddie realizes that Wayne is going bankrupt. So Eddie starts to sell for Reefer Rick. Let's jump into Stranger Things Season 4. So, the first we see of any mention of Hellfire is on Mike's shirt in one of the beginning scenes of the Hawkins plot. In this scene, we find out that Hellfire Club meets tonight, and Ted Wheeler, who's Mike's dad, calls it Dropout Club. The first mention of Eddie Munson is when Mike and Dustin go to Lucas to talk about Hellfire tonight, and then Lucas explains that he has the championship basketball game tonight, and he asks Mike and Dustin to try to get Eddie to move Hellfire to another night. When we first meet Eddie, we see him reading a Newsweek magazine. This article makes the infamous table scene where Eddie stands up and tells the school that as long as you're into band or science or parties or a game where you toss balls into laundry baskets. This is when we first see Jason in the show, which is a threat, which is definitely in line with what we saw him do in Flight of Icarus. The infamous devil horn scene is in response to Jason's "You want something, freak?" and then Eddie goes, ah! Which is funny. I find it really funny and I don't find it cringy. I really like it, but I also really like Eddie. Back at the table, Eddie is sat down. Dustin and Mike ask Eddie to move the campaign, and Eddie is not the happiest because this is Eddie's last campaign that he's throwing before he wants to graduate. Eddie tells them, "I'm not postponing. Go find a sub." Mike asks his older sister, Nancy Wheeler.
Nancy, hey, do you want to join Hellfire tonight?
And Dustin asks his older brother-like friend, Steve Harrington.
Move your date this one time, come on.
What, to hang out with you and Eddie the Freak Munson? Yeah, I'll pass.
They both say no, and then Dustin gets a grand idea, goes to Erica Sinclair, who is Lucas's little sister, and she gets to be their sub. We cut to a scene in the woods behind the school where Eddie frequently sells what he gets from Rick. Eddie is approached by Chrissy in the woods. Chrissy is obviously very unsettled and seems a little freaked out, so Eddie tries to reminisce about 8th grade, the talent show together. Once she feels more comfortable, she asks if he has anything harder than weed. He says not with him, but after his campaign and after she cheers at the basketball game, then they can go to his trailer and he can get her what she wants. Mike and Dustin bring Erica Sinclair to Eddie and the Hellfire Club. They actually meet in the drama room, so that's pretty cool. But they bring Erica, and Eddie questions her knowledge of the game. Erica has a very fast and funny response to that, and he welcomes her to Hellfire. Welcome to Hellfire. Then we get a very cool shot of the game and the campaign happening at the same time, the basketball game and the campaign. The character of Vecna is introduced through Eddie's campaign. The campaign is called The Curse of Vecna. Eddie says that he's missing his left arm and his left eye, and that's how he reveals that Vecna is back in the campaign, and they have to fight off Vecna. The Hellfire Club obviously struggles, and Eddie, when they pull apart to talk through the strategy, Eddie says there's no shame in running. After the basketball game, which they win the basketball game, Max sees Eddie and Chrissy get out of his van and go into his trailer. Eddie goes to his room to try to find his Special K, and when he gets back, he sees Chrissy is in a trance. He tries to shake her and wake her up. He tries yelling. And then Chrissy gets Vecna'd and dies, and that's how we leave off episode 1. Episode 2 starts with cops pulling up to the Munson trailer, and they talk to Wayne. Wayne has no idea what happened. We see in a flashback that Max watches Eddie flee the scene. He goes into his van and leaves. Max talks to Dustin, and then they show up at Family Video to try to find Eddie's friends' phone numbers and ask if they know where Eddie is. Robin and Steve work at Family Video, and Robin eventually finds Rick Lipton's address, which is by Lover's Lake. When they find Rick's address, Steve, Max, Robin, and Dustin head there. They call out for Eddie once they're there, and Steve grabs an oar and starts poking at a tarp, a boat with a tarp in it, to try to see if he's in there. Eddie is eventually poked by Steve, just a little bit, and he jumps up. He has a broken beer bottle in his hand, and he grabs Steve to the wall, holds the beer bottle to his neck in defense because he's scared. Eddie is very scared. Eddie eventually puts the bottle down because Dustin says that they are there to help them. Eddie then opens up about what happened to Chrissy. Eddie explained that he ran away because he was scared. Dustin, Max, Steve, and Robin explain what has happened in Hawkins before, and Dustin calls what happened to Chrissy Vecna's curse. In episode 3, Dustin, Max, Steve, and Robin bring supplies and food to Rick's boathouse where Eddie's staying, and Eddie's name is leaked to Jason after he finds out that Chrissy died. The episode does start with a fake out siren, and Eddie thinks that it's headed towards him, but it's actually headed towards a road near his trailer park, where another student, Fred, who is a reporter with Nancy Wheeler, Fred also was Vecna'd. So they're actually headed towards his body. They don't know where Eddie is yet. Once the rest of the group hears about this, everybody except for Eddie, obviously, goes to the Forest Hills trailer park to talk to Nancy, because Nancy was with Fred the night of his death, and they fill Nancy in with what has happened. Jason and his other jocks, including Lucas, show up to corroded coffin practice, actually, with Gareth and Jeff, and they get attacked. They almost break Gareth's hand. He steps on it so bad that it almost breaks, and they eventually give him Dustin's name. Once Lucas realizes what's going on and that Dustin is involved, he leads the jocks on a false trail to where Dustin is, and he splits from the group. Jason eventually figures out they've been tricked and goes to Lucas's house to interrogate Erica. Another mentionable thing that the group figures out during this time is that you can pull somebody out of Vecna's trance from music. Episode 4, Eddie is not in the episode itself. Lucas finds the rest of Team Eddie: Steve, Max, Dustin, Nancy, and Robin. They find each other in the school while they are going to look for files to see if the people who are being cursed by Vecna have a similar pattern. Episode 5, Eddie is actually in this episode. Eddie tries to figure out food. He's running out of food. He tries to get a food delivery order through Team Eddie, but they don't really answer him because they are on Max watch. And then people from the government, the FBI, and people from the lab interrogate Wayne. And once they see the state of the roof where Chrissy's body died on, they move him out of the trailer. Jason and the rest of the jocks eventually make it to Rick's boathouse. Eddie goes into the actual boathouse boat room and starts a boat to try to get away. Jason finds Eddie and the boat's motor isn't working. Eddie tries to paddle away. Patrick, while they are in the water trying to grab him, Patrick gets Vecna'd in front of Eddie and Jason in the water. Jason thinks that it's Eddie's satanic ritual. Jason does not believe what he saw. He believes that Eddie is the devil. Episode 6, Jason meets with the cops and tells them that Eddie is a vessel for Satan. Team Eddie find out about Patrick dying, and Lucas is very sad because he was the one person he could really relate to on the team. The police release a statement that a person of interest is Eddie Munson, so his name is finally out to everybody. Eddie reports to his team that he's at Skull Rock because he had to get out of there. Steve leads the rest of the team to Skull Rock because it's a popular makeout spot that Steve invented. They eventually meet up at Skull Rock, and this is cut with a town hall meeting where they set a curfew, a strict curfew for the entire town, and Satanic Panic is led by Jason. Jason says that he's gonna do his own search party and he's out for blood, basically. Around the 39-minute mark, Eddie says something really sad that I'm gonna bring up later. He says,
I did the thing that I do now, apparently. I ran.
While they meet up, Dustin was very confused by his compass because it was giving him the wrong direction. So Dustin figures out that the compass was wrong with the way he was leading them. It got more wrong the further east they went. Usually when compasses mess up, there's a big electromagnetic field, and they know that an electromagnetic field means a gate into the upside down, so they go and try to find the gate. They eventually find the gate. It's a gate in Lover's Lake. Steve is the one who goes down with a little flashlight to find it. He pops back up, he says, "Oh my gosh, I found the gate." And then he gets sucked back down. So something's pulling him by his foot into the gate. Not good. Nancy jumps in, and then Robin jumps in, and then Eddie jumps in. Which is good because around this time, cops come and find Max, Lucas, and Dustin. Another bad thing that happens, Demobats attacked Steve real bad. They take about a pound of flesh from him, and the episode ends with Steve getting attacked. Episode 7 time, Nancy, Robin, and Eddie manage to get the Demobats off of Steve, and they run into the woods to avoid the Demobats. Dustin, Lucas, and Max are at the Wheeler house for questioning, and they lie to the police about knowing where Eddie is, and they say, "Okay, well, you're gonna be kept here until you tell us the truth." Eddie sees that Nancy had dressed his wounds because he was getting a little woozy. He does not have a shirt on because he took it off along with his shoes, so he's shoeless, by the way. Eddie grabs his denim jacket, the denim cutoff jacket, off of himself, throws it at him, and says, "For your modesty, dude." And then they head to Nancy's house. There's a pretty sweet scene in here with Eddie and Steve, and Eddie basically tells Steve what he did back there was very metal, very Ozzy, because he bit a bat's head off, like Ozzy did on stage. They reveal they were both jealous of each other because of their respective relationships with Dustin. He also talks to Steve about love and urges him to get Nancy back. Once the group gets to Nancy's house, they find out that the Upside Down is stuck on November 6th of 1983, the same day that Will went missing. They find this out because Nancy opens her journal, and it is the last entries from that day. Steve then finds out that you can hear the real world in the Upside Down, and they try to speak to Dustin through the lights. Eddie knows Morse code, so he signs SOS a bunch of times until Dustin, Erica, and Lucas notice. In the right side up, they all grab Holly Wheeler's, Nancy and Mike's little sister, they grab her light bright and put it on Nancy's bed so that they can sign letters to them, and they talk through the light bright. Some words that they use are stuck and guarded. Stuck is in they're stuck in the Upside Down, and the Lover's Lake gate is guarded by Demobats. Dustin says there's a gate at every murder site. Erica joins Lucas, Max, and Dustin, escape through Nancy's window from the Wheeler house, and take their bikes to go to the Munson trailer. This is reflected in the Upside Down when Robin, Nancy, Eddie, and Steve bike through the Upside Down to get to Eddie's trailer. Once they make it to Eddie's trailer, they go through what I'm calling Chrissy Gate, so the gate above the ceiling. Robin goes first, and then Eddie, and then Nancy's about to go, and then she gets a vision from Vecna. Now, this vision is not the same as being cursed by Vecna. There's no really explained reason why she's the one who gets to see his past either, but she's also shown a horrible version of Hawkins where it is merged with the Upside Down. She's very freaked out. Episode 8 opens. Nancy and Steve eventually get through the gate, and Nancy tells the gang that she wants to go back in the Upside Down. Eddie says, "Okay, well, we need to get tools then," and they say that we need to go to Warzone for supplies. And then Steve's like, "You have a car?" And he's like, "Well, it's not exactly a car, Steve, and it's not exactly mine, but it'll do." So they run through the trailer park. One really funny thing I do want to mention is that Eddie asks Max for a ski mask or a bandana to cover his face up before they run through the trailer park. He says this while he has a black bandana in his pocket. I think that they made him ask that just for the gag of him wearing her Michael Myers mask from season 2. But continuity error. I noticed it. But yes, Eddie eventually goes and runs to the RV. Steve asks and Eddie explains.
The other dads will teach their kids how to fish or play ball. My old man was teaching me how to hot wire.
Eddie, I'm not sure I love the idea of you driving.
Oh, I'm starting to suck her. Harrington's got her. Don't you, big boy?
And then he starts the RV. Steve drives it away to Warzone. At Warzone, Nancy runs into Jason, and Erica also tries to avoid the jocks. Everybody in there kind of tries to avoid the jocks. They leave, but the jocks remember that they were there. Then we get this fun scene of them preparing for battle. Eddie and Dustin make shields with nails in them in a field. We get a really cute line from Eddie where he says,
Never change. Dustin Henderson. Promise me? I wasn't planning on it. Good.
get a nice exit with Separate Ways by Journey, and Eddie can be seen in the back of the RV all bundled up. And then they drop off Erica, Max, and Lucas at the Creel house. Alright, so episode 9, they start by going over the plan. Eddie and Dustin are distractions. That's all. Everybody who needs to goes in the Upside Down at Chrissy Gate, and Steve tells Eddie and Dustin, don't try to be a hero or something. Around the 22-minute mark, Eddie says, now for the fun part, and they grab Eddie's guitar. We get to see this played out around the 48-minute mark, where Master of Puppets is played on top of the trailer to lure the demo bats away from Steve, Robin, and Nancy. Eddie must be really good at guitar because he had to learn it very quickly, because Master of Puppets released on March 3rd of 86, and this is not far after it. Like, it was a very short time frame where he had to learn this guitar riff, which makes it so much more impactful. The plan works out, the demo bats approach them, and then they get off the roof. A really fun line that Dustin and Eddie say in unison is most metal ever, and they smile and they're really, they're having just such a grand old time. And then once they get back in the trailer, Eddie and Dustin try to fend off demo bats from the trailer, but they're trying to get in through a bunch of different holes in the roof. Dustin jumps through to Chrissy Gate to get back to the real world, and Eddie makes a decision with himself. You can see it in his face, and he cuts the rope so that Dustin can't get back to the Upside Down. Dustin asks Eddie what he's doing, and Eddie says, I'm buying more time. Eddie runs back outside and bikes away, taking the demo bats with him. Dustin jumps back through into the Upside Down, but since the mattress isn't there, he hurts his leg doing so, causing him to be very injured, and it's very sad seeing him having to limp. So Eddie's plan, he biked circularly, so he eventually winds up back going towards the trailer. Eddie stops running. The demo bats get him. 1 hour and 43 minutes into episode 9 of Stranger Things season 4, Eddie dies in Dustin's arms. His last words to Dustin were, I love you, man. And then Dustin says, I love you too. Once the final fight is done, we get a 2-day later little screen card. Another mention of Eddie is that in the news, they mentioned that the Munson murders opened a doorway into hell. Around the 2 hour and 1 minute mark, Dustin tells Wayne Munson that Eddie is dead. Dustin holds out his hand and gives him his guitar pick necklace. And another thing he says to Wayne was, he's a hero. Wayne breaks down crying, which always causes me to cry. Main theme of his character is running away from his problems and his fear of ending up like his father, Al. Eddie doesn't want to be like his father, but he ends up running away when Chrissy dies because he's scared. Al ran away from the problem that he started at the end of Flight of Icarus. In Stranger Things season 4, Eddie runs away a lot. But I would like to say that I think that him running away in the situations he did run in are completely valid. He's not like Al, but he's scared he is like Al. Eddie's unfortunate death comes because he stayed in the Upside Down instead of running. That does end up buying Steve, Nancy, and Robin more time by distracting the Demobats. Eddie does stop running, and he dies for a town that hates him. To conclude this analysis, I would just love to say that I love Eddie Munson very deeply. I'm wearing his shirt. I was him for Halloween. I'm gonna throw some pictures here. Boom, boom, boom. Yes, I love Eddie Munson. I love him as a character. I love Joseph Quinn, the actor who plays him. He did excellent in the show, and he's excellent in other media he's in. Fantastic Four was excellent. I do have a I Am Eddie Munson playlist. I can link that in the description below. There's some really cool songs on it. Basically, the playlist consists of songs newer and older that I think that he would enjoy and like. If you don't know, Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 1 releases on November 26th at 8 p.m. EST. This is on Thanksgiving, and then Volume 2 releases on Christmas, December 25th, 2025 at 8 p.m. EST, and then the series finale releases on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2025 at 8 p.m. EST. Please go check out the Stranger Things. Thank you to the Duffer Brothers for creating such a beautiful character. And don't forget to watch Stranger Things. Watch a few trailers. I love Joe Keery, and I hope he doesn't die.